Find me a pilot in 10 minutes or my father dies alone. Victoria Langford threw her phone against her assistant's chest. Inside the echoing hangar, a mop clattered against concrete. Every head turned. Standing beside a bucket of soapy water was a quiet janitor wearing a stained gray uniform, his calloused hands resting on a wooden handle. "I can fly it," he said softly. Victoria stepped toward him, heels clicking like sharp gunshots, scoffing at his faded shirt. "Fly this jet, and I'll marry you." What she didn't know was that one single takeoff would bring her to her knees. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into this deeply moving story of hidden mastery, unexpected redemption, and the unbreakable bond between fathers and daughters, please take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Leave a comment below letting us know what city or country you are watching from today. We love seeing how far these stories travel across the globe. Now, grab a warm drink, settle in, and let us begin. Marcus Cole had been mopping the exact same 20-foot patch of industrial concrete for 23 minutes. He counted every single stroke to keep his mind anchored to the present and keep the ghosts away. Back and forth, stroke 112, stroke 113. It was the steady, rhythmic labor of a man who had spent 8 years learning how to become completely invisible to the world around him. The main hangar at Langford Aerotech was a cathedral of private wealth and corporate arrogance. Multi-million-dollar business jets lined the floor like silver gods resting on polished epoxy, their sleek carbon fiber wings catching the cold morning light flooding through 40-foot glass bay doors. Executives in bespoke three-piece suits and guests in high-end designer coats stepped around Marcus's yellow mop bucket every morning without ever casting a single glance at his face. To them, he was not a human being with a name or a history. He was merely a mechanical fixture of the building, no different from the fire extinguishers or the overhead halogen lamps. For 8 long months, Marcus had worn a dark twill maintenance shirt with an embroidered blue patch reading M. Cole, Facilities Management. His hands, which had once gripped the side stick controllers of experimental military prototypes at Mach 2 over the Mojave Desert, now gripped a worn wooden broom handle smoothed by months of harsh detergents. Invisibility was safe. Invisibility meant nobody asked probing questions about why a former officer wasn't flying. Invisibility allowed him to earn an honest hourly wage and go home every single evening to his 7-year-old son, Noah. At 11:15 on a rainy Tuesday morning, the tranquil, sterile calm inside Hangar 4 shattered into pieces. Marcus heard rapid, frantic heels striking the hard concrete floor with a tempo that signaled immediate corporate emergency. He kept his eyes lowered, maintaining his steady push and pull motion on the damp floor tiles. "What do you mean there is no crew available on the West Coast?" A sharp, razor-thin voice cut through the cavernous room, echoing off the steel trusses 40 feet above. Victoria Langford swept into the hangar like a tempest. At 34, she was the formidable, unyielding chief executive officer of Langford Aerotech, a woman who had spent a decade building her father's regional aviation charter firm into an international aerospace powerhouse. Known across the aviation industry as a ruthless tactician who treated personal obstacles as corporate insults, Victoria possessed a cold beauty marked by razor-sharp cheekbones, dark expressive eyes, and dark hair pulled into a severe, immaculate bun. Behind her scrambled 2 junior assistants, clutching digital tablets and fumbling with frantically buzzing smartphones. "Ma'am, I've called every single captain on our corporate roster." The senior assistant stammered, his voice trembling under the weight of her fury. "Captain Henderson is currently grounded on a mandatory rest cycle in Tokyo. Captain Martinez is on medical leave following shoulder surgery. Captain Patterson's daughter is getting married in Chicago this afternoon." "I don't care about Patterson's daughter," Victoria snapped, her voice cracking like a whip as she turned on her heel, forcing both assistants to freeze in their tracks. "My father suffered a massive hemorrhagic stroke 20 minutes ago in San Francisco. He is in critical care at Bay Area Memorial. The chief neurosurgeon just told me personally that if he undergoes another intracranial bleed within the next 2 hours, he will not survive." She stepped directly into her assistant's personal space, her knuckles white as she clenched her leather handbag. And you are standing here telling me that a multi-billion-dollar aerospace corporation cannot get a single certified pilot into the left seat of my personal Gulfstream? Victoria's phone buzzed violently in her palm. She pressed the device to her ear, listened for 4 agonizing seconds, and every trace of color drained from her face. How long? Victoria's voice dropped from an aggressive roar into a small, fragile whisper. Just tell me how long the surgeon gives him. She lowered the phone with trembling hands, staring blankly at the silver nose of the Gulfstream G650 sitting 20 yards away on the rain-slicked tarmac outside the open bay. They're saying hours. Maybe less. Find me a pilot right now. I don't care about union overtime rules, I don't care about FAA charter regulations, and I don't care what it costs. Get someone in that cockpit. Everyone is grounded by the FAA whether holed over Santa Barbara or already airborne. The second assistant reported in total defeat, scrolling frantically through an operational database. The earliest certified commercial pilot we can charter and fly in from San Diego will arrive here in 3.5 hours. Victoria lowered her face into her hands, her shoulders shuddering once as a silent, desperate gasp escaped her throat. My father will be dead in 3.5 hours. The silence that settled over Hangar 4 was suffocating. Mechanics standing on aluminum maintenance stands 20 yards away stopped their ratchets mid-turn. Ground crew managers lowered their clipboards. Nobody moved. Nobody dared to breathe. Marcus stood beside his yellow cleaning cart, his grip tightening on the wooden mop handle until his knuckles turned bone white. Deep inside his chest, an old, dormant pulse began to beat, a rhythm buried in the sands of the Nevada flight test corridors 8 long years ago. Walk away, his mind whispered sharply. Stay invisible. Keep mopping. Go home at 4 o'clock to Noah. Then Victoria let out another tiny, broken gasp. Not the sound of a terrifying billionaire CEO commanding a boardroom, but the raw, unvarnished sound of a terrified daughter realizing she was about to lose her father without ever getting the chance to say goodbye. Before his rational mind could stop his moving limbs, Marcus set his mop carefully against the rim of the yellow bucket. The wooden handle clattered against the galvanized metal, a sharp, ringing sound that echoed across the quiet concrete floor. I can fly it, Marcus said clearly. Every single head in Hangar 4 snapped toward the far corner of the bay. Mechanics leaned over safety railings. Ground crew members stared in disbelief. Victoria turned slowly, her expression shifting rapidly from grief-stricken confusion to sharp, icy irritation. Marcus stood beside his cleaning cart, wearing scuffed leather work boots, worn denim pants, and his faded gray maintenance uniform with dark grease stains across the left cuff. He looked precisely like what he was supposed to be, an hourly facility worker stepping out of line and interrupting executive business. I'm sorry, Victoria said, her tone freezing the air between them as she stepped past her assistants. What did you just say? I said I can fly it, Marcus repeated smoothly, his voice low, steady, and entirely devoid of panic. He gestured casually toward the silver Gulfstream G650 sitting on the wet tarmac outside. I can take you to San Francisco right now. The younger assistant let out a brief, disbelieving laugh. Is this guy serious? Is he having a mental breakdown? Victoria stepped toward Marcus, her heels clicking against the concrete like deliberate, rhythmic rifle shots. She stopped 3 feet away, her sharp hazel eyes scanning his stained uniform, his calloused hands, and his unshaven jawline with merciless scrutiny. You're telling me that you can operate a $65 million ultra-long-range business jet? Victoria asked, her voice dripping with bitter irony. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied, holding her gaze without a single flinch. And where, exactly, did you learn to pilot high-performance turbine aircraft, Mr. Cole? Playing video games in the break room? The United States Air Force, Marcus said plainly. Air Force Flight Test Center, Edwards Base. Experimental Test Pilot Division. The young assistant's giggles died down instantly. Victoria's dark eyebrows lifted slightly, but her deeply ingrained corporate cynicism quickly reclaimed control of her features. A test pilot, she murmured smoothly, her lips curving into a cold, patronizing smile. And now you're pushing a broom in my maintenance bay for $16 an hour. Forgive me if the mathematical logic doesn't quite sum up, Mr. Cole. Marcus offered no defense. He did not puff out his chest, nor did he pull out military identification. I'm not asking you to audit my background, Ms. Langford. Your father is dying in Bay Area Memorial. The Santa Barbara Stormfront is closing the northern flight corridor in 20 minutes. And I am the only person standing inside this hangar who can get you into the air before the FAA grounds all regional departures. Victoria let out a short, cold laugh. A bitter, hollow sound born of overwhelming emotional desperation and exhaustion. All right, Marcus Cole, she said, her voice rising so every mechanic in the hangar could hear her sarcastic decree. Fly this jet to San Francisco. Land it safely on runway 28 right before my father passes away. And I'll marry you. Explosive, mocking laughter erupted from the two assistants at the corporate joke, and a few junior ground crew members snickered in the background. Marcus stood motionless. The sting of public humiliation burned hot against his neck, but his posture didn't shake. 8 years ago, after his back had been shattered in a catastrophic crash and his co-pilot had died in the desert, Marcus had sworn never to step into an aircraft cockpit again so he could guarantee returning home to his young son every single evening. But promises made in profound grief do not account for life or death moments like this. Well, Mr. Cole? Victoria taunted softly, stepping an inch closer. No witty response to my generous proposal? Marcus looked directly into Victoria's eyes, his expression turning so cold and authoritative that the assistant's laughter evaporated on the spot. Keep your proposal, Ms. Langford, Marcus said in a deep, gravelly register that echoed off the steel walls. Just grab your bag and get on the plane. Without waiting for her reply, Marcus laid his facility key ring onto the cleaning cart, turned his back on the CEO, and walked with firm, deliberate strides straight out onto the rain-slicked tarmac toward the open-air stairs of the Gulfstream. Marcus climbed the aluminum air stairs of the Gulfstream G650 and stepped into the luxurious cabin, completely ignoring the plush white leather seating and polished burl walnut tables. Pushing open the sliding pocket door to the flight deck, he dropped his heavy frame into the captain's left-hand seat. The moment his hands touched the molded armrests, 8 years of dormant muscle memory surged through his nervous system like a high-voltage electrical current. His calloused fingers moved across the overhead switch panels with fluid, terrifying speed. Master battery, on. Auxiliary power unit, start. Avionics master, engage. The sophisticated glass cockpit burst into life, for massive high-definition liquid crystal displays illuminating Marcus's weathered face in vibrant cyan, amber, and gold light. Twin Rolls-Royce BR-725 engines began their deep, subterranean spool-up whine outside the fuselage. Behind him, the heavy acoustic cabin door sealed shut with a soft pneumatic hiss. Rapid footsteps echoed down the carpeted aisle, and Victoria stood in the entrance of the flight deck. Her arrogant mockery had completely vanished, replaced by a wide-eyed, unsettled shock as she watched his hands flying across the flight management system keypad, typing in airway waypoints and fuel burn calculations with blind, effortless speed. You actually know how to program a Honeywell Primus flight computer, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly as she held onto the doorframe. Vectoring over the Pacific coastline at flight level 410 to bypass the convective storm cell building over Santa Barbara, Marcus said, not turning his head for a fraction of a second. Estimated flight time, 36 minutes. Go sit down, put your shoulder harness on, and stay out of the flight deck. Victoria stepped back into the passenger cabin and strapped herself into a leather seat. Marcus pulled on the heavy aviation headset, adjusting the boom microphone, and pressed the radio transmit bar on the control yoke. Langford ground. This is Langford 1 Heavy, Marcus transmitted, his voice carrying the calm, absolute cadence of a veteran flight lead commanding a squadron through contested airspace. Requesting immediate emergency departure clearance to San Francisco Airport. IFR flight plan active. A young air traffic controller's voice crackled through the flight deck speakers. Langford 1, state pilot identification and credentials. We don't have a filed flight master for your tail number. Langford ground. Pilot in command is Marcus Cole. He transmitted clearly, his tone dropping an octave into pure military precision. Air Force Flight Test Center, Edwards. Call sign, Raven 6. Confirm flight plan authorization under Emergency Medical Protocol Alpha 1. An agonizing 6-second silence filled the cockpit, broken only by the steady hum of the avionics cooling fans. Then, the controller's voice returned, transformed instantly from routine corporate indifference into deep, unadulterated reverence. Copy Raven 6. Good Lord, sir. We have your service records on file in the military cross system. Flight plan approved as requested. Langford 1. Cleared for immediate taxi to runway 27 left. The entire southern departure corridor is cleared for you, Captain. In the passenger cabin behind him, Victoria heard the controller's words echoing clearly over the cabin audio system. Raven 6. Her hands gripped her armrests tightly as she stared at the closed flight deck door. Marcus advanced the dual throttle levers. 30,000 pounds of thrust unleashed from the twin turbines, shoving Victoria deep into her leather seat as the $65 million aircraft hurtled down the wet asphalt of runway 27 left, lifted its nose effortlessly, and pierced the dark overcast cloud deck, climbing vertically toward the sky. At 41,000 feet, the Gulf Stream broke through the top of the pitch-black storm clouds into brilliant, blinding sunlight. The sky above was a vast expanse of deep sapphire blue, while a sea of white cloud tops stretched endlessly below. Marcus engaged the autopilot cruise profile at Mach 0.92 and leaned back in his seat, resting his chin on his fist as he monitored the engine pressure ratios. A soft chime sounded in the cabin as Victoria unbuckled her harness, walked down the narrow aisle, and stepped into the co-pilot's seat. The cold arrogance that had defined her in the hangar was entirely gone, replaced by a quiet, intense curiosity. "How did you do that?" she asked softly, staring at the endless blue horizon. "That takeoff. The way you turned into the crosswind over the coast. The plane felt like an extension of your own nervous system." She looked at his profile, studying the faint silver scar running along his jawline down to his collar. "The air traffic controller's voice completely changed the moment you spoke your call sign. Why did he call you sir? What does Raven 6 mean?" Marcus kept his eyes on the navigation displays. "Because aviation is a very small world, Ms. Langford. I was a flight commander at the Edwards Flight Test Center. I logged 4,000 hours flight testing experimental hypersonic propulsion systems, variable sweep wings, and automated fly-by-wire override systems for the Department of Defense." Victoria stared at him in utter disbelief. "If you held that level of military authority and technical expertise, why were you mopping floors in my hangar for $16 an hour?" Marcus looked down at his calloused hands resting on his thighs. 8 years ago, I was testing an experimental tactical airframe over the Nevada test range. My co-pilot was a 26-year-old lieutenant named Jason Mitchell. At 42,000 feet, an uncommanded flight control computer failure triggered an inverted flat spin. He took a slow, deliberate breath, his chest rising as the painful memory resurfaced. I ordered Jason to eject immediately, but his ejection seat rails warped under the 9G rotational load. He was trapped inside the cockpit. I stayed at the flight controls down to 4,000 feet, fighting the aerodynamic stall to force the nose down so his seat would clear the vertical stabilizer. I managed to level the wings and Jason ejected, but his seat struck the tail fin. He was killed instantly. Victoria covered her mouth with her hand, a soft gasp escaping her lips. "The military review board cleared me of all operational fault," Marcus continued, his voice low and raspy. "They called it a mechanical failure. But every time I closed my eyes, I heard Jason's voice over the intercom. I resigned my commission. My back was shattered in the final impact when I ejected at 2,000 feet, and my wife, Sarah, spent 2 years helping me learn how to walk again." His voice softened further, trembling slightly. 3 years ago, Sarah passed away from acute leukemia. I was left with my 4-year-old son, Noah. I took the facilities job at your hangar because it provided union health care for Noah, required zero emotional investment, and allowed me to pick him up from elementary school at 4 o'clock every single afternoon without fail. I chose to be invisible so my son would never have to grow up without his only remaining parent. Tears glistened in Victoria's eyes, spilling over her lashes and running down her cheeks. I called you a janitor, she whispered, her voice choking. I made a disgusting, arrogant joke about marrying you just to humiliate you in front of my staff. You were terrified for your father, Victoria, Marcus said gently, turning his head to look at her for the first time. Fear makes people build ugly, defensive walls so they don't have to feel helpless. Victoria buried her face in her hands, her shoulders trembling as she wept softly in the co-pilot seat. I haven't spoken to my father in 3 years, Marcus. We had an explosive argument over the expansion of the company. The last words I ever said to him to his face were, I don't need your advice or your legacy anymore. And now he might die in an ICU thinking his only daughter views him as nothing more than a corporate obstacle. Marcus gently extended his hand, placing his warm, calloused palm over her trembling shoulder. He doesn't think that, Victoria, Marcus said softly. Fathers don't hold grudges against their daughters when the clock runs down. He knows who you are. Just be there when he wakes up. At 12:04 p.m., the Gulfstream G650 began its steep descent through the dense gray fog bank hanging over the San Francisco coastline. Marcus clicked off the autopilot, taking manual physical control of the yoke as 40-knot ocean crosswinds buffeted the aircraft's wings. 300 feet, 200 feet, 100 feet. The dense coastal fog parted suddenly, revealing the rain-slicked asphalt and green runway threshold lights of runway 28 right at San Francisco International Airport. Marcus adjusted the rudder pedals, holding the aircraft's nose perfectly aligned with the runway centerline despite the howling crosswind. He flared the heavy aircraft smoothly over the threshold, touching the main landing gear down so softly that Victoria barely felt the transition from air to solid ground. Langford 1, exit at Taxiway Hotel, San Francisco Tower radioed over the speaker, their tone filled with admiration. And Captain, magnificent stick work in that crosswind. Medical transport is cleared to meet you directly on the ramp. Marcus taxied the Gulfstream straight to the private executive terminal ramp, where a high-speed medical transport sedan, arranged by Marcus via satellite radio mid-flight, was idling with its emergency strobes flashing. The massive Rolls-Royce engines spooled down into silence. Marcus unbuckled his harness, stepped out of the flight deck, and opened the main air cabin door. Victoria stood near the exit, looking at her wristwatch in profound, speech-defying awe. 36 minutes. You brought us across the entire state of California in 36 minutes. Your driver is waiting right at the bottom of the stairs, Marcus said, handing her coat to her. Go. Drive fast. Victoria looked at Marcus, her hazel eyes brimming with uncontained emotion. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around his neck in a fierce, tight hug. Thank you, Marcus, she whispered into his ear. Thank you for saving my father's life. She pulled back, ran down the air stairs, and threw herself into the back seat of the waiting sedan, which sped off toward Bay Area Memorial Hospital with sirens blaring into the afternoon fog. Marcus stood on the top aluminum step of the jet, feeling the cool northern breeze against his face. His hands were completely steady. For the first time in 8 long years, the haunting memory of Lieutenant Jason Mitchell was quiet. 2 days later, Hangar 4 at Langford Aerotech in Los Angeles was quiet. Marcus had returned to LA on a commercial flight, put on his gray facilities uniform, and picked up his wooden mop. Push and pull. Stroke 84, stroke 85. The steady rhythm of an honest life. At 10 o'clock a.m., the double-frosted glass doors of the executive suite opened. Victoria stepped out onto the hangar floor alongside an elderly gentleman in a tailored wool coat. Charles Langford, frail, leaning on a wooden cane, but very much alive following a successful neurosurgical intervention. Victoria led her father straight across the concrete floor toward the far corner where Marcus was mopping. Captain Cole, Charles Langford said, stepping forward and extending a weathered, trembling hand. My daughter told me everything that happened inside this hangar. I am alive today because you possessed the immense courage to step up when my daughter was drowning in her own pride. Marcus set his mop aside and shook the old founder's hand with deep respect. I'm glad you're recovering, Mr. Langford. Victoria stepped forward, holding a thick navy blue leather dossier featuring gold foil lettering. As Chief Executive Officer of Langford Aerotech, I am executing 2 major operational changes today, Victoria announced clearly, her voice carrying across the hangar floor so every mechanic could hear. First, all facilities and maintenance personnel across our global locations will receive an immediate 40% wage increase, full equity profit sharing, and updated family health benefits. A chorus of shocked cheers and applause erupted from the mechanics and maintenance staff across the hangar floor. Second, Victoria continued, looking directly into Marcus's hazel eyes with an authentic, radiant smile. I am establishing a brand new operational division within our corporation, the Cole Aviation Safety and Flight Training Academy. You are hereby appointed as Director of Flight Operations, responsible for training all corporate crews on high-stress recovery systems. She handed him the heavy leather dossier. Your executive contract mandates a 4-day work week ending at 3:30 p.m. sharp every afternoon, so you can pick up Noah from school, accompanied by an annual base salary of $350,000. Marcus stared down at the gold foil document. Director of Flight Operations, Marcus Cole. Why are you doing all of this, Victoria? Marcus asked softly. Because a company isn't built on stock valuations or profit margins, Victoria whispered, tears shining in her eyes. It is built on human warmth, trust, and integrity. You reminded me who I wanted to be, Marcus. You gave me back my father, and you deserve to fly again. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, a genuine, hard-earned smile breaking across his face. He pulled a cheap blue pen from his shirt pocket and signed his name on the executive contract. 3 hours later, Marcus pulled his truck up to the bus loop outside Lincoln Elementary School. 7-year-old Noah came running out through the double wooden doors, stopping dead in his tracks in total awe. Standing beside the truck was his father, wearing a crisp navy blue flight jacket with silver pilot wings pinned proudly over his heart. Dad! Noah yelled, running across the concrete and throwing his arms around Marcus's waist. Are you a pilot again? Marcus lifted his son into his arms, pulling him close as he looked up at the wide, clear blue sky stretching over Los Angeles. Yeah, buddy, Marcus whispered, his eyes shining with hope. Dad is a pilot again. What an extraordinary story of hidden mastery, fatherly devotion, and ultimate redemption. Marcus Cole proved that true authority and skill aren't defined by the clothes you wear or the job title you hold, but by the strength of your character when others need you most. Victoria Langford learned that the greatest legacy isn't built on corporate margins, but on human connection and truth. If Marcus's journey touched your heart today, please hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more deeply human stories. Drop a comment below with your favorite moment. We read and reply to every single one. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story.